You have to, I think you have to be, if your school, or if you have kids and your school and the school board doesn't hate you, you're doing something wrong at this point. Like you should be the bane of their existence. You should constantly be, you don't have to, there's a way to approach it, relentlessly pointing out the harm of what they're doing. I think I skipped a whole one because I didn't do life saving.
Are you taking questions?
Yep.
I am.
Taking questions. So if anyone has a question, I can bring the microphone to you if you have a question for Mia.
So do trans people, are they changed to marry, or do they still think both ways?
Oh, sorry, say it again.
Okay, say a trans girl, meaning boy,
Okay.
does she always now think trans boy, or does she sometimes think about who she was, or
Do they ever change their mind? Is that the question?
no, like from day to day, or they think?
Okay, so you're asking what's going on in the mind of the young woman, the teenage girl who thinks she's a boy. Is that what you're asking?
Yes, yeah.
So I've thought a lot about this. I can't, it's difficult to know for sure. In my mind, to these young girls, these teenage girls, it's very real. They may not really think that they are actually boys, and I don't think they even want to be boys. I think they just don't want to be girls. And our culture with this madness, with this whole trans is a new way to be a person, tells them that they don't have to be girls. However, I do think that it's real to them, which is why I understand it's very difficult when someone like me comes along and says, you know, it's a cultural fad, it's a dangerous false belief. I can understand why they feel under attack when I say such things, because to them, the identity is actually very real. And I think what we need to remember is the pain is real too. They are suffering, they are hurting, and they are being offered this identity and this medical pathway as a solution. And that is a societal problem. We are the ones, as a society, we are the ones who are to blame for presenting this as an option to them, when every other generation before them, they had no choice but to muddle through what is not the most fun time of life, which is puberty. So I do think there's definitely doubt. All of them, I'm quite sure. They have all of these little harmful concepts, and one of them is, let me think, what's it called? Internalized transphobia. So if you doubt, if you think to yourself, if it's a 14-year-old girl and she's a boy and she's on testosterone and she starts to think, oh, maybe I'm not a boy, that's internalized transphobia according to trans activists. And so then she can just get rid of that doubt and carry on taking the testosterone, because you can't be transphobic. That's a terrible thing. So I'm quite sure that they do. The last thing I'll say on this is, and this is the most horrifying part to me, because I spend so much time speaking to detransitioners, that I know that there's a moment, many detransitioners go through this, where it was very real, they passionately believed it, they pursued all of the medical interventions, and the moment they woke up from the mastectomy and they have the gashing scars across their chest and the tubes coming out the side, that's when they realized it was all a mistake. It jolts them out of the fantasy, it jolts them out of the false belief, just the brutality of the surgery. But by then it's too late.
Is there any support for those who detransition?
Officially, nowhere near enough. Canada doesn't yet recognize that detransition is a thing, so we don't have detransition medical care. They need a lot of medical care because the medical treatment itself has iatrogenic effects, like it induces illness into the body. So we haven't yet, as a nation, officially recognized that detransition exists, and that's because it's transphobic to recognize that detransition exists. Trans activists forbid you from talking about detransition because that breaks the narrative, right? If trans is innate and natural and healthy, how can detransitioners exist? That proves that there's something that you can regret it, that you can change this supposedly fixed and immutable characteristic. The organization, I'm the director of GenSpect Canada, so GenSpect International has a support group, provides support for detransitioners, so we'll provide therapy for detransitioners. There's a Beyond Trans group where all of the detransitioners can come together and support each other and then find the resources that they need. But the Canadian government very much needs to recognize the existence of this group.
Is anyone doing any studies on transitioning because of trauma response? Sexual abuse, emotional abuse? Just the result is a trauma response.
Did I turn it up? No. Again, that in the world of gender affirming care and in the world of trans activists is transphobic. So no, in gender affirming care you can't ask why the young person has come to the conclusion that they are transgender, because that's transphobic. You can't dig into the past and figure out what's led them to come to that conclusion, because trans is natural and healthy. So why would you try and find out why this person is trans? That's transphobic. Why would you try and help the young person get over it? That's conversion therapy in the minds of these activists. This is what WPATH did to the world. This is what trans activism, the field of gender affirming care guided by trans activists, has done. It has prevented exactly what you're asking. That's the essential work. The rate of, it can be a trauma response. The rate of adverse childhood events is what they, that's the term in England. When they examined the records of the young people who had gone through the Tavistock Gender Clinic, they found outrageously high rates of adverse child events, trauma, sexual abuse. One of the statistics was chilling. The number of young people who identified as trans who had a parent on the sex offender register was 10 times higher than the average population. So it very clearly is, if she's a girl and she's been abused abused in any way, sexually or physically, she can just think, well, I don't want to be a girl anymore, and she can identify as a boy, and we will affirm that, and we will put her on the testosterone and chop off her breasts without addressing the trauma that led to her reaching that decision. So it's twofold in that we're ignoring treating the serious trauma that the girl has gone through, and at the same time destroying her body and chopping healthy body parts off and putting her on testosterone, which then affects her mental health as well. So no, it's absolutely criminal that nobody is. There are some on our side of the debate. There's Lisa Littman has studied the new teenage cohort, and they have found definitely that there's evidence of rates of trauma. But in the affirmation model, that's gender affirming care, you can only affirm. The young person shows up at the clinic, they say they are trans. The only thing you can do is say, yes, you are trans. Here's your drugs, here's your medical pathway.
Could someone not collect data from detransitioners?
We are. So there aren't that many studies. McKinnon. What was the? I haven't even read her study. We have a Canadian study that came out last week. Has anyone read it? McKinnon study. So McKinnon it's a funny name. She's a woman who thinks she's a man, and she chose the name McKinnon. She's a WPATH member, but she's one of the rare WPATH members who actually acknowledges detransition, so I have to give her credit for that. And she has done a detransition study that did get published last week, but I was too busy to read it. We have our Beyond Trans group where we've done surveys, and there's just astronomically high rates of trauma. I'm not saying this is a possibility, a hypothesis. We know from talking to detransitioners that so many of them have experienced trauma, and that was exactly the reason why they transitioned. So it's not speculation, it's fact.
I have a question, and if anybody else has a question, maybe it's easier if you come up to the front. In a study the size of Ottawa, for example, we're 1 million people, so I don't know how many students that would be. I guess about maybe 60 or 70,000 students.
72,000 in the public board,
72,000?
60,000 in the Catholic board, and there's another 40,000 in the other two boards.
Okay, so close to like 200,000? So the population of that, how many transgender students would there be approximately?
Trick
Do you know?
question. None.
Does anyone know the answer? Do you?
None.
Right. We have a winner. Because there's no such thing as a transgender child, so there are none. It's impossible to answer because they don't give us the numbers anymore. I mean, we once had numbers out of gender clinics in Canada. We had a graph, and we all used it against them by showing the inflection point and then the spikes, and then they start releasing the numbers. I can give anecdotal good news that I can do. So I know a number of teachers in Ottawa, and I talk to them all the time, and they all saw the social contagion explode. So they all saw it starting around for most it was around 2018. They didn't have any trans kids, so-called, in their class until around 2017, 2018, which is right about the time that's when the social contagion began. Then some of them would have up to 5 trans-identified girls in their class who thought they were boys. And every year these kids are coming through, and there's just tons of so-called trans kids in each class. This spiked very much at COVID. That was the peak. And that's quite simply because the social contagion spreads online, and all of the kids were locked in their houses, spending all of their time on social media. And of course, it is something of a trauma response, or it's a response to difficult life challenges. And COVID lockdown was most definitely a difficult life challenge. But then now I've talked to many teachers in the last year, and they tell me that maybe they have one in their class, many classes, none at all. I think the social contagion has very much peaked in high school kids. I'm still a bit worried about university because it's still a fashionable political statement. And when you get to university, I don't know if you all remember what you were like when you were in university, it's very passionate about the cause of the day, and trans is still that, and our universities are still filling their heads with the absolute garbage of gender identity ideology. But I can say that anecdotally, the teachers are telling me that the contagion is definitely running its course.
Question. So, let me see if I can phrase this right. Having read the testimony of and watched a lot of supportive information on people doing these surgeries and procedures, would you say that a certain percentage, small, medium, or large percentage, of the teachers who encourage children to undergo these procedures, or the people who choose to undergo them themselves, are in fact motivated by a desire to deconstruct sort of sexual dimorphic normalcy in our culture? Do you understand what I mean?
I think I do. Kind of queer theory, We're going on to
Well,
the.
that would definitely be part of queer theory. Like, so I went to a trans protest on Bank Street, and the speakers, it was last summer, the summer before, and the speakers were all not speaking about the advantages or the joys of being trans, but their hatred for normalcy, their hatred for specifically capitalism, Christianity, and colonialism were the exact words of the MC. It seemed like, watching this, the purpose of the trans movement was to deconstruct and attack at different levels Western civilizational norms. Is that, would your studies and experience reflect that in any way?
Yeah, I think there's two tracks to this whole movement, this whole contagion, this whole political movement. There's the T and the Q. And they're often lumped together, but I think they're actually completely different. So the T would be your gender identity ideology. That would be teaching kids that they all possess an inner gender soul, and it's what defines whether they're boys or girls. But then the Q is queer, and that's different. That is exactly what you're talking about. Smashing the norms. It's anti-capitalist, it's anti-colonial, it's destroying the nuclear family, it's destroying everything that, well, the fabric of society, so that they can, I've never really understood what they envision comes next. They're all with their green hair and their nose rings and everything, and they want to destroy the family and the fabric of society, but then what? What are we left with? I can't envision how they think that's a good thing. They don't typically medicalize, you'll notice. The kids who think they're trans, they will have the body parts chopped off. The queer activists are typically completely intact, but they'll just grow their hair long and put a bit of lipstick on and start ranting about capitalism.
So the follow-up to that would be the Tavistock Institute, was that what you mentioned, in the UK?
Yes.
Which was among the worst. What, did any really famous or powerful Canadians send their kids there, do you know?
It's okay. It's very interesting. I did look into. Some people are not happy with me when I say this, and forgive me if you're the same. But Sasha Carney, I think it would have been 2012, 2013. This is when Sasha Carney, they're living in London, and she comes out as, I don't even know what, trans or non-binary or whatever. I think that first wave of parents, if you've got a kid who comes out as trans or whatever, first wave of parents, you don't know what you're doing. This is a whole new thing, and there's one of the world-leading gender clinics in your city. This is where you take your kids. So I can't blame any of the first wave parents. Their kid suddenly comes out as a member of the opposite sex. There's a gender clinic that's supposed to be full of experts dealing with these kids. You take your kid to that clinic, and then the first wave of parents, the second wave, probably even the third wave, everything I've just talked about, most people have no idea how completely unhinged and corrupt this field of medicine is. They think it's an actual ethical field of medicine. They think if they take their kid to see an expert, they'll get real medical care. They don't understand the corruption. So, yes, he did send his daughter to the Tavistock, but that was truly one of the best gender clinics in the world by reputation at the time, and nobody really understood what an atrocious medical scandal it was. And I must point out, it's been a medical scandal from patient zero. Patient zero was in 1998 in the Netherlands, a young gender non-conforming lesbian who didn't want to be a lesbian, and she showed up at the clinic and they started this experiment on her. It's been a medical scandal since patient zero, but the parents who took their kids to the clinics couldn't have known that, so I try and be as generous as I can towards them.
It wasn't malice, it was stupidity.
It's also interesting that this seems to be a Western phenomenon. Like in a lot of third world countries, transgenderism doesn't even exist. So can you explain why it's a Western thing? I think I know the answer, but I'll let you explain it.
There is a very simple explanation, and it's because it is a culture-bound syndrome. So the the contagion of young people identifying as trans can only happen in nations where the modern trans rights movement exists, because the contagion was triggered by the messaging of the modern trans rights movement, and that messaging is we all possess gender identity. That's not true. That's political messaging. The messaging is if you hate your body, that could be a sign that you're trans. That puts every single adolescent in any nation touched by modern trans activism at risk of coming to the conclusion that because they hate their body, they're trans. It's a culture-bound syndrome. It simply cannot exist in a culture where there is not this unhinged, deranged ideology poisoning the minds of young people. It's not an innate variation of human existence. That's transactivism that framed it that way, but that's not true. It's a culture-bound epidemic.
I would just add a couple of comments and maybe a couple of data points. So someone asked earlier about how many trans-identified kids might be in Ottawa. Back not long after we met, I made some predictions based on data points we had from CHEO. 2014, there was between 8 and 12 kids that were referred to our local children's hospital with some gender incongruence. That was really before all this language and it really caught on. And those numbers aren't maybe surprising because that phenomena has always been around. A young child who is confused by their sexuality and their orientation, who they're attracted to, could come to a conclusion like, if I'm a boy and I'm attracted to other boys, maybe I'm actually a girl. And it's in the minds of children. In 2021, there was something like 200. And I plotted the data points, and the National Post confirmed what I projected last year at 2024, seeing 500 patients at CHEO.
Right, but didn't I had from a really reliable source that there were at least 1,000 on the waiting list?
Yes.
They were at maximum capacity,
Yeah,
but then they had 1,000 on the waiting list.
Yeah. The second thing has to do with social contagion and whether this is the TQ idea and Vlad's question about is this intentional? Is there a conscious intention to move this forward? And that question comes up every time we deal with a social contagion. And my profession is in the stock market. And in 2008, a social contagion almost collapsed the world economy. We were within about 30 minutes before the bailouts, kind of stopped the gaps and prevented the economic system from imploding. And every time there's a stock market bubble, the question is it the greedy bankers? Is it these people who intentionally did this to create this outcome? And the answer always is it's both. There's a little bit of conscious self-interest with a failure to understand the broader consequences, and then there's a whole bunch of people that get sucked into the emotion and into the sort of the cult of the whole thing.
Right, but I kind of disagree.
Okay.
I understand your point, but with the gender, with the trans adolescent contagion, the social contagion, I don't believe it was deliberate. In a nutshell, what I think happened is in the 1980s, a bunch of men who have a paraphilia did not want the world. They were building up to launch the modern trans rights movement, and they knew that they couldn't launch it based on a paraphilia. So they created a concept called gender identity. It's sanitized, it's easy to sell. We'll base our rights movement on gender identity. We won't mention the paraphilic erotic urges. And then they launched their rights movement, bombarding people with messaging about gender identities so that they could have all of their demands met. And their demands were full access to women's spaces, full access to all the hormones and surgeries that they desire without any psychiatric barriers at all. And I think they just accidentally triggered a social contagion. I personally don't see that anyone deliberately triggered an enormous social contagion of adolescent girls wanting their breasts cut off because they think they're boys. I think it was paraphilic men wanting to disguise their erotic urges, sanitizing the movement with gender identity, and then bombarding society. Because think about it, they had to do a whole rewrite of what it means to be human. If you're going to change the meaning of man and woman to, a woman is anyone with a female gender identity, doesn't matter if she has a penis or not. If a man is anyone with a male gender identity, that's a complete rewrite of what it means to be human. You have no choice but to bombard society relentlessly with the messaging of your campaign. And because they had such ambitious plans, they bombarded society, they just accidentally triggered a social contagion. That's not to forgive them at all, because you can't just decide to rewrite reality and force everyone to live in a deranged fictional world. But even more than that, the moment we saw the social contagion begin, 2014, 2015, if you look at a graph from any gender clinic across the Western world where modern trans activism launched 2014, 2015, you will see there are almost no referrals, then there's an inflection point and it just spikes up. It's the most obvious social contagion in all of history. And the real true crime is that they forbid anyone from doing anything about it. They saw the social contagion, they saw the adolescents flooding the gender clinics, and not only did they not act to prevent it, they persecuted and vilified anyone who said, hang on a minute, is there something going on here? Maybe there's a social contagion. They persecuted that as transphobic, and therefore they prevented the world from intervening and quenching the flames of the contagion. And for me, that's completely unforgivable.
That's what I mean by conscious, with narrow self-interest.
They didn't
and then
trigger
unintended
it. They
consequences.
didn't trigger it, but they
Nobody sets out to do
Oh,
the
hi,
contagion. The contagion is sort of secondary to this agenda, conscious agenda by a group of people, but they don't perceive that they're going to create a contagion.
Can I just say one more thing? So if you've read Eric Hoffer's the True Believer.
Yeah, I think I recommended that book to you.
Yeah, it's a great book. The psychology of the true believer is such, right? So the people who triggered this truly believe that trans is natural and healthy. I don't think they're faking it. I think the autogynephilic men, they're denying those urges. I don't know if I'm going on too long, but there's a hilarious story that I will tell quickly. So in 2020, when they were debating the conversion therapy ban, so-called C6 at the time, there was a man who thinks he's a woman, and he was called as a witness, and he's there in the Justice Committee, and he's a witness. Before he went to give testimony, he's on Twitter and he's ranting about evil TERFs and saying, trans women, his words, trans women are not autogynephilic men. He's saying autogynephilia is not real. And then he goes and he testifies in Parliament and he says autogynephilia is not real. And then we all look at his Twitter history, and there he is, like 5 years before, tweeting his autogynephilic masturbation habits to the entire world. The man is clearly an autogynephilic man. But he felt so confident saying autogynephilia is not real, because I think in his mind, he's convinced himself that he's really a woman. He's a true believer. He really is a woman. And this is just, if you call him autogynephilic, you're hateful. So the psychology of the true believer is such that the people who triggered the epidemic, when they saw all of these kids flooding the gender clinics, they were completely convinced that this is just a minority finally comfortable coming out of the closet. There have always been this many trans kids, and how wonderful it is that society can now accept them. That's how far detached from reality they are, that they can't even see the truth that everybody else in the real world can see.
What's a TERF?
Oh, sorry. TERF stands for Trans Exclusionary Radical Feminist. I actually love this because it's a derogatory term that trans activists apply to any woman who says men are not women, or any woman who says there's no such thing as a lesbian with a penis. They will call you a TERF. And so we kind of reclaimed the label. So I'm a proud TERF, because it just means I live in reality, and I think it's wrong to chop body parts off teenagers. And you can also, I don't know if you mind my language, but you can also change the acronym to tired of explaining reality to fuckwits.
Thank you. I want to make an AstroTurf joke. but-
This might be the last question, but here we go.
I don't know if this is in the realm of what we're talking about, but a teacher or a counselor saying to somebody, maybe you're something else, is that not conversion therapy?
Oh, good point.
Especially if you're gay.
I think it's truly the darkest irony of our time is that if you take our conversion therapy ban, which supposedly made it illegal to perform conversion therapy, what that actually did was made medically converting the bodies of a large number of gay or lesbian adolescents the only option. So gender clinics are performing the new conversion therapy. It really is. Like it's as bad or worse than the original conversion therapy, because in the original conversion therapy it was largely psychological, although they did use hormones as well. But they didn't chop off a gay man's penis. They didn't sew an arm flesh appendage onto a lesbian's groin. So what's happening in gender clinics is conversion therapy, and it's much worse than the original.
Are we done?
I,
Just ask one thing.
oh,
Sorry.
one more question.
Okay.
There's always one thing.
Because you're involved with the schools, so what grade are they starting? What are they telling them? And what grade?
Yeah.
So it's difficult to say because if you look, it's not in the official curriculum until what, grade 7, grade 8, and yet you have all these activist teachers bringing in materials from outside groups, and then they can use, it's something called a teachable moment. It's been so abused, this teachable moment, where they can just inject this absurdity into any moment in the classroom and call it a teachable moment. So I remember there was a big drive in the DDSB, Durham District School Board. They had a big drive in kindergarten and grade 1 and 2 for reading I Am Jazz as some kind of, I don't know, special LGBT crazy week. I Am Jazz's book, it's about the young boy, Jazz Jennings, whose mother told him he was a girl because he liked sparkly bathing suits and princess gowns. Put him on puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones, and then on television, like you watched it on television, he had his penis cut off. It's a horror story, but there's a children's picture book that is aimed at kindergarten level, and it contains the sentence, I have a girl brain in a boy body, that's what it means to be transgender. Like, think about what lunacy that is to teach a kindergarten kid that you can have a girl brain in a boy body, and it's based on the way he knows he has a girl brain is because he likes princess gowns and ballet. It's the most regressive pseudoscientific garbage, and it's dangerous because it actually poisons the minds of all of these kids, untethers them from reality while they still believe in the tooth fairy, and then sets them up for possibly a lifetime of medicalization. So I know that I got to give a special shout out to the Waterloo Region District School Board because I've shared their materials so often. There's the early years, I think it was grade 1 or grade, I don't think it was kindergarten, I think it was grade 1 and grade 2. They had materials that basically, the material actually said, you get to choose whether you're a boy or a girl. Now can you imagine, they believe in Father Christmas, they believe in the Easter Bunny, and you are telling them, a person in a position of authority that they trust, you're telling them that they get to choose whether they are boys or girls. It's, all of the poison needs to be completely removed from every single school in Canada. And then we need to launch inquiries into how such a catastrophic safeguarding failure could ever have happened. How we could have sacrificed an entire generation of kids to the demands of unhinged trans activists. I think heads need to roll.
No.
Actually, on that note, we are called Action for Canada, and sometimes we struggle with what actions to take. But as a group of people here, I guess whether you're parents or not, what kind of things can we do as regular citizens to stop the insanity?
You have to. I think you have to be. If your school, or if you have kids and your school and the school board doesn't hate you, you're doing something wrong at this point. Like you should be the bane of their existence. You should constantly be. You don't have to. There's a way to approach it. Relentlessly pointing out the harm of what they're doing. It's a kind of. It's a strange thing to witness because I don't think they have it. I think they think they're doing the right thing. I know my children's school, which is rainbow flags all over and all kinds of crackpot stuff being taught. They're not doing it to harm kids, and that's the biggest hurdle that you have. These are good people who think they are doing the right thing, who have completely lost touch with reality. So the most difficult task you have is bringing them over to reality, and that can only be done patiently and calmly, trying to show them the harm, and you won't get there right away. But constantly pestering them, telling them, pointing things out, asking for meetings. And again, it always comes down to talking about it with anybody who will listen everywhere you go. I find I do it because small talk is one of the most common questions is what do you do? And so I tell people, and I find that just nobody disagrees with me. I talk to people from all walks of life everywhere I go, every time I leave the house, and no one ever disagrees with me because no decent person does support this. So talking about it, getting into the schools, constantly telling the teachers, telling the school board. Email doesn't work very well because they just delete it. They don't bother reading it, especially if they've got they see your name, they're like, oh, I'm not going to read her email. So in person, really, like if you can get meetings, if you can explain things as calmly as you can, be as informed as you can as well. Go in there with all the information. And as for politicians, I'm at a complete loss, to be honest. I'm a bit demoralised by the fact that we have 4 more years of the Liberals. I thought we would have big change by now. I think the Liberals and the NDP are completely unreachable. Work on your Conservatives for the next election, where hopefully we actually get a change of government. Get your local Conservative MPs to understand this as well as they possibly can, so that when the time comes, they're informed and they know how important it is. Yeah, that's about it.
Great. Well, thank you very much for this information. It's a little bit sobering, but I think uplifting at the same time because we know what we're dealing with now and we know what we have to do to take action. And you mentioned like the federal, but actually I guess at the trustee level, we have to do some work there. Here in Ottawa, I guess the Ottawa board, they don't have any trustees right now, but I guess we'll find out in a few months. By next election, we'll have a new slate of trustees so we can get on their case and talk to them as well.
Yeah, always in person. If you can do it in person, that's the way to do it. I don't have a lot of success with emails or writing to people. Try and get those in-person meetings and convince them.
Great. Thanks very much for your time, Mia. She'll be sticking around and